The reflection that wasn't mine. I used to love mirrors. That changed after what happened. It started with small things. At first I'd catch glimpses of my reflection moving wrong, not dramatically, just tiny delays, slight hesitations. I'd tilt my head, and in the mirror my head would follow just a fraction of a second too late. I blamed stress, bad lighting, or my imagination. Until one night, when I woke up thirsty. I went to the bathroom, turned on the light, and looked in the mirror, and my reflection wasn't asleep. I should have seen tired eyes, messy hair, the slack face of someone just waking up. But the reflection was awake, wide-eyed, alert, staring right at me. I froze. It was subtle, but there was no doubt. It wasn't copying me anymore. I lifted my arm slowly. It didn't move. A cold wave of terror crashed over me. I stepped back. Then my reflection smiled. A slow, unnatural grin that stretched too wide, like it had been waiting for me to notice. I ran. The next morning I avoided mirrors. I kept my head down while brushing my teeth, changed clothes without looking. But curiosity got the best of me. I needed to know if I had imagined it. That night I stood in front of my bedroom mirror and stared. My reflection did everything right. It copied me perfectly. I lifted my arm, waved, made a face. Everything was normal. I exhaled in relief. But then, as I turned to walk away, I saw it. In the corner of my eye, my reflection didn't turn with me. It stayed, still facing forward, watching me leave. I haven't looked in a mirror since. The man in the vents. Clara moved into her new apartment on a rainy Sunday. It was old but cozy, and the rent was cheap, almost too cheap. But she didn't question it. She was just happy to finally have a place of her own. The first night was peaceful. The second night she heard a sound. A soft, scraping noise, like nails dragging against metal. It was coming from the air vent above her bed. She stared at it in the dark, her breath frozen in her throat. Maybe it was just the building settling. Maybe a rat. She convinced herself it was nothing and went back to sleep. But every night the noise came back, and it got closer. One night, as she lay in bed, the noise changed. The scraping stopped. Instead, she heard breathing. Shallow, slow, right above her. Clara sat up, heart pounding. She grabbed her phone and shined the flashlight at the vent. For a second, there was nothing. Then, two eyes, staring at her through the vent slats. She screamed and fell out of bed. The eyes disappeared. The room was silent. She barely slept, and the next morning she called her landlord. "There's someone in the vents," she said, voice shaking. The landlord sighed. "That's impossible." "I saw eyes." A long pause. Then the landlord spoke again. "Listen, don't open the vents, don't try to look inside, just ignore it." She hung up, but the words unsettled her. Ignore it? How could she ignore something watching her? That night she stayed awake, waiting. The noise came again, slow scratching like someone trying to claw their way out. She couldn't take it anymore. Grabbing a screwdriver, she climbed onto a chair and began unscrewing the vent cover. The moment she removed the last screw, the cover fell to the floor with a clang. She pointed her flashlight inside. The vent was empty. Just dust, metal, and darkness stretching deep into the walls. No footprints, no signs of anyone ever being inside. She let out a shaky breath. Maybe she really was imagining things. Then she looked down at the vent cover on the floor, and her stomach dropped. There were scratches all over the inside of it, like someone had been trapped inside, trying to get out. That was the last night Clara stayed in that apartment. A week later, the police found something. A hidden crawl space behind the walls. Inside, they found a small mattress, empty food wrappers, and dozens of tiny holes drilled into the vents. Holes just big enough for someone to watch through. Someone under the bed. Lena had always been afraid of the dark, but at 16 she told herself she was too old for that. So when she moved into her new bedroom, a room with a huge empty space under the bed, she ignored the nagging fear that something could be hiding there. One night, as she was drifting off to sleep, she heard a soft rustling sound. She froze. The sound was coming from under the bed. Her heart pounded. She wanted to believe it was just the house settling, but then a whisper. So quiet she almost didn't hear it. "I know you're awake." She couldn't breathe. The voice was soft, raspy, wrong. Slowly, carefully, she reached for her phone on the nightstand. She didn't dare move too fast. If she moved too fast, it might know she heard it. Her fingers wrapped around the phone, and she took a deep breath. In one motion, she turned on the flashlight and pointed it toward the floor. Nothing. The space under the bed was empty, but then another whisper. Wrong side. The voice came from behind her on the bed. She didn't turn around, she ran. The wrong parents. When Lily was 7, she woke up in the middle of the night to the sound of her bedroom door creaking open. She rubbed her eyes and saw her mother standing in the doorway, silhouetted in the dim hallway light. "Mom?" she whispered. Her mother didn't answer. She just stood there, breathing slowly. Lily felt uneasy. Something was off. Then, from the darkness of her parents' room, she heard it. A soft voice. "Lily? Don't move." It was her mother's voice, her real mother, from inside the bedroom. Lily's eyes darted back to the figure standing in the doorway. It wasn't her mother. The thing in the doorway smiled. A wide, too-stretched grin that showed too many teeth. Then it took a step toward her. Lily screamed. The hallway light flicked on, and suddenly the figure was gone. Her real mother rushed to her side, holding her, shushing her. "It's okay, baby," she said. "It was just a bad dream." But Lily knew. It wasn't a dream. Because when she looked past her mother's shoulder toward the open closet door, she saw a face, watching, smiling, and it looked just like her dad. Don't answer the door. Ethan's parents always told him the same rule whenever they left him home alone. If someone knocks after dark, don't answer the door. They never explained why. They just said it wasn't safe. One night when he was 12, they went out for dinner and left him alone. He played video games in the living room, barely noticing how late it had gotten. Then, knock, knock, knock. A slow, deliberate knock at the front door. Ethan froze. His parents weren't supposed to be back yet. He checked the time. 10:13 p.m. Another knock. Harder this time. He crept toward the door, standing on his tiptoes to peek through the peephole. There was a man standing outside. Not his parents, not a neighbor, a stranger. He was tall, wearing a black hoodie, his face hidden under his hood. He stood completely still, head tilted slightly, like he was listening. Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't move. The man knew he was there. Then the doorknob turned. Ethan backed away. His parents had locked the door before they left, right? The man stopped twisting the knob. For a moment, everything was silent. Then a voice, low, scratchy, wrong. "Ethan, let me in." Ethan's stomach dropped. He hadn't said a word. How did the man know his name? He ran to his room, locking the door, hiding under his blankets, trying to control his breathing. Minutes passed, then an hour. Eventually his parents came home, calling his name. He ran to them, sobbing, telling them everything. His father checked the security cameras. There was no one there. No man, no knocks, no voice. Ethan tried to argue, but they just looked at each other, uneasy. His mom locked the door again. Then, before turning off the lights, she muttered under her breath, "He came back again." The thing in the baby monitor. Mia loved babysitting. It was easy money. Watch some TV, eat snacks, and make sure the kid didn't set the house on fire. One Saturday night, she was watching Oliver, a quiet 2-year-old. His parents put him to bed before they left, and all Mia had to do was check the baby monitor every once in a while. At first, everything was normal. The little screen showed Oliver sleeping peacefully in his crib, his stuffed bunny tucked under one arm. Then, around 10:30 p.m., something changed. Mia glanced at the monitor and froze. Oliver was sitting up, but something was wrong. The room was dark, but his face looked blurred, almost stretched, like the monitor was glitching. She leaned closer. Then Oliver turned his head, not toward the camera, toward something in the room. Mia's stomach tightened. There was nothing there, nothing she could see anyway. She turned up the volume. Static. A soft hissing noise, and underneath it so faint she almost missed it. A whisper. Mia's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't Oliver's voice. It was deeper. It sounded like laughter. Then the screen cut to black. She jumped up, sprinting to Oliver's room. She flung the door open. Oliver was fast asleep. His bunny still tucked under his arm, breathing steady. The room was empty. The baby monitor crackled back to life. The screen flickered. Mia's phone buzzed. A text from Oliver's mom. Forgot to mention, the baby monitor sometimes picks up signals from other houses. Don't worry if you hear anything weird. Mia stared at the screen. The static shifted. For just a second, she saw a face. Grinning, watching. Then it was gone. The voices in the static. Caleb's grandfather had an old radio. The kind with dials instead of buttons. The kind that crackled with static when you turned the knob too fast. Never play with the radio at night, his grandfather had warned. Sometimes it picks up things you don't want to hear. Caleb never believed in ghost stories, but one night, home alone and bored, he decided to test it. He turned off all the lights, sat on the floor and twisted the radio dial slowly. Static, a faint voice. More static, then a whisper. At first it was too soft to understand. He leaned in closer. The whisper turned into words. "Caleb, can you hear me?" His blood went cold. The radio shouldn't know his name. He turned the dial again fast, trying to shake the signal. More static. Silence. Then laughter. Low, breathless. "Wrong. Don't turn it off," the voice rasped. Caleb's hands shook. He reached for the dial. "I see you." His breath hitched. His reflection in the dark window. It wasn't copying him. It was smiling. He turned the radio off. The laughter didn't stop.